Hello friends. Before we start, make sure to like and subscribe to the channel and leave a comment with where you're from and what time you're watching. That way, YouTube will keep showing you stories just like this one. Now, let's begin. It was just past midnight when I hit the long stretch of highway that cut through the woods like a black scar on the map. I was driving back to my college dorm after spending the weekend at my dad's house in Oregon. The trip had been longer than planned. Too many detours, too little sleep, and the hum of the tires beneath me had turned hypnotic hours ago. The road was empty, not just quiet, but dead. Every few miles I'd pass a sign or an exit that looked like it hadn't been used in years. Rusted gas prices, faded billboards, broken lights. My phone had lost signal half an hour earlier, and the only light came from my headlights, cutting through the fog that hung over the highway like ghostly breath. I wasn't scared, not yet, just tired. I told myself I'd pull over soon, find a gas station, grab coffee, stretch, then finish the last 80 miles before sunrise. I had an energy drink sweating in the cup holder, my playlist whispering low, and the rhythmic wiper blades giving me something to focus on. That's when I saw it, a small gas station glowing in the dark like a relic from another decade. The sign read, "Anderson's Fuel and Service," the letters half burned out. A single flickering bulb buzzed above the pumps, casting light over cracked asphalt and a faded red storefront. There were no cars on the road behind me, none in front of me. Just one vehicle parked at the far edge of the lot, a dusty old Crown Victoria, pointed toward the tree line behind the station. I slowed down, uneasy. There was something strange about that car. The windows were tinted black, the paint scratched, and the front bumper looked like it had been hit and never repaired. But what really got me was the way it was parked. Not near the pumps, not near the store, just facing the trees. Like whoever drove it wanted to watch the woods. Still, I told myself I was being paranoid. I was just tired. I pulled up beside the pump, stepped out, and the cold night air bit through my hoodie. The silence was thick. No crickets, no wind. Just the faint buzz of the fluorescent light and the low whine of the gas meter clicking as I started to fill my tank. Inside the convenience store, through the grimy glass, I could see the cashier slouched behind the counter scrolling on his phone. Mid-40s maybe, bored, barely awake. When I turned back toward my car, that's when I heard it. Footsteps, quick, light, coming from the side of the building. Before I could even react, a woman came out of the shadows. She walked fast, almost stumbled, her eyes darting left and right like a hunted animal. She was maybe mid-30s, pale, her blonde hair sticking to her face, as if she'd been running. Her clothes were damp, her jeans dirty at the knees. She came straight toward me, stopping just outside my driver's window. Her hands were shaking. "Please," she said, her voice trembling. "Please help me." I froze. My first instinct was to get in the car, lock the doors, drive. Everything about the situation screamed wrong, but something in her eyes, pure fear, rooted me to the spot. "Someone's following me," she whispered, glancing over her shoulder. He's here!" The word sent a spike of adrenaline through me. I looked around but saw nothing except the dark stretch of highway and the lonely gas pumps under the flickering light. I swallowed. "Who's following you?" She didn't answer. Her breathing was sharp and uneven, her gaze fixed on the tree line beyond the station. My pulse hammered as I tried to make sense of it. If she was in danger, I couldn't just leave. But if this was a setup... My thumb hovered over the car lock, debating, when she suddenly whispered, "He's here." Her tone changed everything. It wasn't just fear, it was terror. Against my better judgment, I followed her gaze. At first, I didn't see anything. Then my eyes adjusted, and I noticed a figure standing at the edge of the woods. Tall. Still. Almost blending into the darkness except for the faint reflection of light on his face. A man. He didn't move, didn't speak. Just stood there, half hidden behind the trees, like he'd been watching us the whole time. My chest tightened. "Do you know him?" I whispered. She shook her head quickly. "No. He's been following me since Fairview. Every time I stop, he stops. Every time I move, he's just there." Her voice cracked on the last word. I looked back toward the trees. The man hadn't moved, but his head was tilted slightly now, like he knew we were talking about him. I could almost feel his stare cutting across the lot, heavy and cold. I took a breath, my mind racing. "Come inside the store," I said. "There's a cashier, cameras. He won't try anything in there." She hesitated for half a second, then nodded. We walked toward the store together, my pulse loud in my ears. I didn't dare look back until we were under the harsh fluorescent light. Inside, everything felt wrong in a different way. Too bright, too quiet. The air smelled like burnt coffee and old floor cleaner. The cashier barely looked up from his phone. The woman hovered near the front door, her arms wrapped around herself like she was trying to disappear. "He's still there," she murmured. I didn't want to look, but I did. Through the glass window, the man was closer now, standing near the pump where my car was. And then, slowly, he lifted his arm and pointed directly at her. Not waving, not gesturing, just pointing. I turned back to the cashier. "Hey man," I said, trying to sound calm. "Can I use your phone?" "Mine's dead." He sighed, rolled his eyes, and pushed a dusty landline toward me. My hands were shaking as I dialed 911. When the dispatcher answered, I gave the address, mile marker 46, Anderson's Fuel, and told her there was a man outside watching us. She told me to stay inside. Officers were on the way. But when I looked out the window again, he was gone. The woman let out a small sob. "He always does that," she whispered. "He's never there when they come." I turned toward her, confused. "What do you mean always?" She just shook her head and backed away toward the door. "Wait," I said. "Don't." But she was already pushing through the back exit, vanishing into the dark. By the time the police arrived 15 minutes later, the lot was empty. No man. No car. No woman. Just me, standing inside the gas station, trying to explain something that sounded insane. They took my statement, searched the area, and told me it was probably just a drifter or someone passing through. I wanted to believe them. But a week later, when I stopped at that same gas station on my way home, the cashier gave me a strange look. "You came back," he said. "Yeah," I replied, uneasy. "Why wouldn't I?" He frowned. "Thought you were done with this place." "After last time." "What last time?" I asked. He blinked at me, confused. "You don't remember? You came in here about a month ago, same time of night. Said someone was following you. You were real shaken up. My blood ran cold." "That's not possible," I said slowly. "I was at my dad's a month ago." He stared at me for a long moment, then shrugged. "You sure about that?" I didn't answer. When I stepped back outside, the lot was empty again. But for a moment, just a split second, I thought I saw movement in the trees beyond the gas pumps. A faint silhouette. Tall. Still. Waiting. I started working the night shift at a gas station off Route 46 about 8 months ago. It wasn't glamorous, far from it, but it paid enough to cover rent and my student loans. The hours were long, the air always smelled faintly of diesel, and the hum of the fluorescent lights never really stopped. but I liked the solitude. No traffic, no crowds, just me, the radio, and the occasional trucker passing through. The station itself was old, built sometime in the 70s, I think, with flickering bulbs over the pumps and cracked pavement that had seen better days. We were about 15 miles outside of a small town in Montana, surrounded by miles of empty road and pine woods. Most nights were quiet, sometimes too quiet. The first time I noticed the car, it was parked across the road from the station, just beyond the reach of the lights. It was an older model, maybe a black Chevy Impala, its windows tinted so dark they looked like polished obsidian. At first, I didn't think much of it. Travelers pull over all the time. Maybe someone was tired or checking their phone. But the thing was, the car never moved. For hours, I'd glance up from the counter, from restocking shelves, from brewing coffee, and there it would be. Headlights off, engine off, just sitting there like a shadow stitched to the road. By 3 a.m., my curiosity started turning into unease. I stepped outside to dump the trash, pretending not to stare directly at it. That's when I noticed something. Inside, behind the windshield, there was a faint glow. A phone screen, bright and cold against the dark interior. And I swear, it was pointed at me. I went back inside and locked the door. We weren't technically supposed to. Corporate policy said we had to stay open 24/7. But screw that. Something about it felt wrong. For the rest of that shift, the car didn't move, didn't flash its lights, didn't drive off, just waited. When I pulled up the next night, the car was already there. Same spot, like it had been waiting for me. I told myself I was being paranoid, that it could be a coincidence. Maybe someone just parked there regularly. But every few minutes, I'd glance out the front window, and every time it was still there. At one point around midnight, a semi pulled in to fuel up. The driver, an older guy named Rick who passed through every Tuesday, noticed me staring past him. "Everything all right, kid?" he asked. I hesitated, then pointed out the window. "That car's been parked there all week." Rick squinted. "Probably some kid sleeping off a long drive." "Don't worry about it." But his tone didn't match his words. He looked uneasy too. When he left, I decided to test something. I turned off the lights over the pumps, just for a minute. The station went dim, and that's when I saw it, the faintest glimmer of movement. The car door opened. Someone stepped out. The darkness swallowed most of their features, but I could make out the shape. Tall, thin, wearing a hooded jacket. They stood completely still, facing the gas station. Watching. I didn't move, didn't breathe. After what felt like a full minute, they stepped backward into the shadows, vanishing completely. The next few shifts were worse. Every night, that car was there. Sometimes I could see the faint reflection of a phone screen inside, sometimes not. But the worst night came on a Thursday. It was cold, mid-October, and the wind was sharp enough to sting my skin when I stepped out to take the trash. The road was empty except for that damn car. It hadn't moved an inch. I turned toward the dumpster, and that's when I saw it. A bright flash, just for a split second, the unmistakable flicker of a camera. They were taking pictures of me. I dropped the trash bag and ran inside, slamming the door shut and locking it. My hands were shaking so hard I could barely hold my phone. I wanted to call the police, but what would I even say? Someone sitting in their car across the road taking pictures of me? They'd probably tell me to file a report in the morning, so I did nothing. And that was my biggest mistake. 2 nights later, the car didn't show up. For the first time in a week, the lot across the road was empty. I felt relief, like maybe whoever it was had finally moved on. But around 1:30 a.m., I caught something strange in the reflection of the glass door. Movement behind me. When I turned, I saw a figure standing just beyond the light, near the air pump at the edge of the lot. They weren't across the street anymore. They were here. I couldn't see their face. The shadows covered everything from the nose up. But I could feel their eyes on me. My heart hammered so hard, I could hear it echoing in my ears. The man took a step forward, then another. And then he raised something. A phone. Flash. Another photo. That was enough for me. I ducked behind the counter, grabbed the aluminum baseball bat we kept for emergencies, and fumbled for my phone. 911. What's your emergency? The dispatcher said. There's a man outside the gas station, I stammered. He's been watching me for days. He's taking pictures of me. He's here right now. She told me to stay on the line and wait for officers to arrive. I peeked up through the window. He was still there. But something had changed. He wasn't moving anymore. He was just standing, motionless, with the phone raised, like he was daring me to look away. Then, after a few eternal seconds, he turned, walked calmly toward the road, got into his car, and drove away, headlights off. The police arrived about 20 minutes later. They searched the area, asked questions, and even checked the security footage, though I warned them it was an ancient system. And of course, the moment they tried to play it, the screen went black. Static. The system had crashed earlier that night. I hadn't even realized. They took my statement, wrote a report, and told me to call again if he comes back. That was it. The next few nights were quiet. No car, no strange flashes, no footsteps in the dark. For a while, I convinced myself I'd overreacted. Maybe it was just some weirdo passing through. Maybe it was done. But then, about 3 weeks later, I came home from work, tired, half asleep, and found something on my kitchen table. At first, I thought it was just junk mail, but it wasn't. It was a plain white envelope, no return address, my name written in shaky black ink. My front door had been locked. I always double-checked it. The windows were shut, too. But somehow, this envelope was sitting dead center on my kitchen table, placed perfectly, like someone had taken their time. My hands trembled as I tore it open. Inside were 4 photographs. The first was of me behind the counter at work, staring out the window, my reflection barely visible in the glass. The second was of me outside the station, near the dumpster, a faint cloud of breath visible in the cold. The third made me drop the envelope entirely. It was my house, taken from outside through the living room window. I was sitting on the couch, eating dinner, watching TV, completely unaware. And the fourth made my blood run cold. It was of me sleeping, taken up close. So close that I could see the pores on my skin. Whoever took it had been inside my room. I called the police again. They came, searched my house, and found nothing. No signs of forced entry, no fingerprints, no footprints outside the window. They filed another report, said they'd keep an eye out. But I could tell by their tone they didn't believe me. I quit the gas station the next day. I packed up and moved 2 states away within a week. I didn't tell anyone my new address. I didn't even keep my old number. Months passed. I started to sleep again. Started to believe maybe it was over. But sometimes, late at night, I still think about those photos. How close they were. How quiet whoever it was must have been. How long they might have been standing there, watching me breathe. Last month, I moved into a new apartment. Fresh start. I was unpacking boxes when the mail slot clattered. An envelope slid through. No stamp. No name. Just one photograph. A picture of my new building, taken from across the street. I was driving through the back roads of Tennessee late one Friday night. cutting through the hills on my way back to Nashville after visiting my sister. I've always liked late-night drives. The quiet hum of the engine. No traffic, just you and the road. But that night, the silence felt heavier than usual. The kind that presses against your chest and makes you feel like you're being watched, even when you're not. The highway had narrowed into a 2-lane stretch surrounded by pine trees and open farmland. No cell signal, no towns for miles. My playlist had ended 20 minutes ago, leaving only the sound of gravel pinging beneath the tires and the faint rattle of loose coins in the cup holder. That's when the light on my dashboard blinked. Low tire pressure. I muttered a curse. I had just had those tires rotated last week. The nearest gas station I remembered was about 20 miles back. Too far to risk it. I decided to keep going, hoping I'd come across something. A rest stop, a diner, anything. After another 10 minutes, I spotted a faint glow in the distance. A single flickering neon sign rising out of the dark, like a ghost. As I got closer, I could make out the letters through the grime. Dale's Fuel and Service. It looked abandoned. The paint was peeling, and one of the pumps was tipped sideways, like it had been hit years ago and never fixed. But the open sign buzzed weakly in the window, so I pulled in, figuring maybe it was one of those old 24-hour places where the owner slept in the back. I parked near the air pump, stepped out, and stretched. The night air was cold and damp, smelling faintly of gasoline and wet dirt. I crouched down beside the rear tire. Sure enough, it was lower than the rest. Not flat, but close enough to worry me. That's when I heard a voice behind me. "You having some trouble, friend?" I spun around so fast I nearly lost my balance. A man was standing about 10 feet away, half in shadow. I hadn't heard him approach. He was tall, mid-40s maybe, with a thin build and a gray mechanic's jacket smeared with oil. His face was long and hollow, with sharp cheekbones and pale eyes that caught the light like glass. I stammered, yeah, just a low tire. I think I can handle it." He smiled, or at least tried to. It didn't reach his eyes. "These back roads'll do that to you. Gravel gets in between the treads, slow leaks before you even notice." He took a step closer. "I can give you a hand if you'd like." My first instinct was to say no, and I did. I appreciate it, but I'm good. Just topping it off. He didn't move, just stood there, watching me like he was waiting for something else. Maybe for me to change my mind. His silence stretched out until it started to feel deliberate. "Suit yourself," he said finally. His voice was calm, but there was a flatness to it. "Pump's old. Sometimes jams. If it does, there's another one out back. Works better." I nodded without looking at him, pretending to focus on the tire. My stomach tightened. The whole place looked deserted. No other cars, no humming lights from inside the building, not even a faint sound of a TV or radio. I glanced toward the station window. The glass was grimy, but I could make out shelves inside, and no one behind the counter. He noticed where I was looking. Greater than owner's gone home. I keep an eye on the place sometimes. Live just down the road. His grin widened just a bit. "You don't have to worry." Something about the way he said that last part, like he'd practiced it, made every hair on my arm stand up. I forced a small laugh. "Thanks, but I'll be fine." He nodded slowly, still watching me. "All right then. Just don't want you stranded. Phones don't get much signal out here." He was right about that. My phone had been on no service since I left the main road. I pretended to check it anyway, just to end the conversation. When I looked up again, he was still there, unmoving, hands in pockets, face half hidden by the flickering sign. Something felt wrong. I couldn't explain it. but my gut was screaming that I needed to get back in the car and leave. I turned to grab the air hose, but when I looked back up, he was gone. Just like that. No footsteps, no sound. My eyes darted around the lot, empty. I scanned the shadows by the building, the trees beyond the lot. Nothing. Okay, I muttered, trying to laugh it off. Maybe he went inside. But when I walked closer to the station window, I saw it. The inside was dark, completely dark. No lights, no sound, no movement. I tried the door. It didn't budge. It was locked. I stepped back, my pulse quickening. If the place was closed. What the hell was that guy doing here? I turned toward my car, ready to leave, and froze. The man was standing behind it, not moving, not smiling, just standing perfectly still, facing me from across the hood. His face was clearer now under the glow of my headlights. Pale skin stretched tight, lips cracked, eyes wide and cold. "How's the tire?" he asked softly. His voice was too calm, too steady. I tried to keep mine from shaking. "It's fine." "Thanks. I'm heading out." He took a slow step closer. Greater than, "You sure?" "Sometimes those leaks don't show till later." Another step. "Might go flat 5, maybe 10 miles down the road." I reached for the door handle, but he shifted, just slightly. Not blocking me, but close enough to make me stop. My heart thudded in my chest. He smiled again, wider this time. "Why don't you pull around back? Easier light. Safer, too." That broke it. "No thanks," I said quickly, climbing in and slamming the door. I hit the lock button so hard it hurt my thumb. He didn't move, just stood there, staring through the glass as I fumbled the keys into the ignition. The engine sputtered, coughed, then roared to life. I shifted into reverse, but for some reason, maybe fear, maybe curiosity, I glanced up one last time. He was smiling. Not just smiling, laughing. I couldn't hear it, but I could see his shoulders shaking, mouth open in a soundless laugh. I slammed the gas pedal. The tires screeched as I backed out, gravel flying. I threw it into drive and sped down the highway, hands trembling on the wheel. The old gas station disappeared in the rear view, swallowed by trees and darkness. For the first 10 minutes, I couldn't stop checking the mirror. Every pair of headlights that appeared behind me made my chest tighten. But none of them followed for long. Eventually, the road opened up and I started to breathe again. I told myself it was just some weirdo. Maybe a squatter, maybe drunk. People live strange out here. That had to be it. But about 20 miles later, something caught my eye. In the side mirror, far back, headlights. 2 small white dots creeping over the horizon. At first, I thought nothing of it. But then I realized they weren't fading. They weren't gaining either. They were just there, holding steady, following. My throat went dry. I pressed harder on the gas. The road curved through a stretch of forest, the headlights vanishing and reappearing behind the trees. Every time I glanced back, they were exactly the same distance away. Not closer, not farther, just there. I pushed the speed up to 75. My tires roared against the asphalt. Still, the lights stayed with me. Another few miles passed before I saw an exit sign, a diner and gas station off Route 12. Civilization. I swerved onto the ramp, tires screeching as I hit the lot. The bright lights of the diner flooded over me like salvation. The headlights behind me disappeared. I parked, turned off the engine, and sat there for a moment, heart hammering in my chest. My hands were shaking so bad, I could barely unbuckle my seatbelt. Through the diner's glass windows, I could see a handful of people eating. Truckers, couples, a few locals. Normal life. I'd never been so grateful to see strangers. I went inside, ordered a coffee, and tried to calm down. For a while, I just sat there, watching the parking lot. Nothing. No headlights. No sign of anyone. By the time I got home, the fear had dulled into exhaustion. I convinced myself it was just some creep playing games. It didn't matter anymore. I was safe. That was 2 weeks ago. Last night, I was taking out the trash when I noticed something sticking out from under my windshield wiper. An envelope. No postage, no name. My stomach sank as I picked it up. Inside were 3 photographs. The first was me crouching by my tire that night, face lit by my headlights. The second was of me sitting inside the diner, drinking my coffee. And the third was taken from outside my apartment window. Me, asleep in bed. It was close to 1 a.m. when I finally saw the sign for Route 46, a narrow stretch of highway cutting through the farmlands between Indiana and Ohio. I'd been driving for nearly 7 hours, heading home after spending the weekend with my sister. I told myself I wouldn't stop until I made it to my own bed, but my body had other plans. My eyes were burning. My stomach churned with caffeine. And worst of all, I needed to pee so badly I could barely focus on the road. There wasn't another car in sight, just endless fields on either side, and the hum of my tires on the asphalt. When the glowing blue sign appeared on the shoulder, GASFOODRESTROOMSNEXTEXIT, it felt like a gift from heaven. I took the exit, turning onto a cracked, empty road that led to a tiny gas station sitting alone in the dark. The place looked ancient. A single fluorescent light buzzed above the pumps, and a neon sign that once read, "Harper's Fuel Stop," flickered on and off, the letters barely visible under years of grime. The parking lot was empty, except for an old white van parked crookedly near the edge of the building. No lights inside, no sound. I hesitated for a second. Something about the silence felt off. But my bladder didn't care about instincts. I parked, grabbed my jacket, and stepped out into the cold night air. The wind smelled faintly of oil and damp concrete. The convenience store doors were unlocked, but the bell above them gave a weak jingle when I entered. Inside, it smelled like stale coffee and disinfectant. The overhead lights flickered occasionally, and the hum of an old soda machine filled the silence. A bored-looking cashier sat behind the counter, scrolling through his phone. He was thin, mid-20s maybe, wearing a red baseball cap that shadowed his face. "Hey," I said softly. "Can I use the restroom?" He didn't look up. "Back hallway, left door," he muttered, his voice flat. "Thanks," I said, forcing a polite smile he never saw. The hallway leading to the bathrooms was narrow and dim. A single fluorescent bulb buzzed overhead, casting a jittery glow across the peeling beige walls. One of the ceiling panels was missing, revealing pipes and cobwebs above. At the end of the hallway were 2 doors, one marked Men, the other out of order. Of course. I sighed, pushed open the men's room door, and stepped inside. It was exactly what I expected. Gray tile stained with age, a single cracked mirror above the sink, and 2 stalls. One of them was missing its door entirely, while the other was closed, with an out-of-order sign duct-taped to it. Perfect. I didn't care. I just needed relief. I used the working toilet, washed my hands quickly, and was about to leave when I noticed something odd. The faint sound of tapping coming from the vent above the mirror. Tap, tap, tap. 3 quick knocks, then silence. I frowned. Probably the pipes, I thought. Old buildings make weird noises. I grabbed a paper towel and turned off the faucet. As I was drying my hands, I heard the restroom door creak open behind me. I froze. Footsteps entered the room, slow, measured, dragging slightly. I turned, expecting another traveler, maybe someone from the van outside. But no one answered when I said, "Hey, it's occupied." The door clicked shut. Then came the unmistakable sound of a deadbolt sliding into place. Someone had locked the main door from the inside. My pulse quickened. I called out again, louder this time. Someone's in here!" No response. The footsteps moved closer, the scuff of boots against tile, pacing slowly between the stalls. Whoever it was wasn't in a hurry. They weren't making noise by accident. I backed up until I was against the sink, eyes darting between the mirror and the door. My throat was dry. The footsteps stopped. Silence. For a moment, all I could hear was the hum of the flickering light overhead. Then, a whisper. "You shouldn't be here." My breath caught. It came from somewhere near the stalls, but I couldn't see anyone. I swallowed hard and forced a shaky laugh. "Sorry," I said, my voice trembling. "Didn't know this was, off limits." Nothing. Then came the tapping again. This time, not from the vent, from the stall door. Soft, deliberate taps. Tap, tap, tap. I took a small step backward, my shoes squeaking on the tile. "Look, man, I'm just gonna go, okay?" The tapping stopped. For a moment, I thought whoever was in there had finally decided to leave me alone, until I saw movement in the mirror. In the reflection, I caught a glimpse of something through the gap at the bottom of the stall. Boots. Old, muddy, heavy work boots. They shifted slightly, turning to face me. Then, silence again. My chest tightened. My mind was racing through explanations. Drunk guy, late-night trucker, prank. But the air in the room had changed. It felt heavier, suffocating, like I was breathing through a wet cloth. I reached slowly for my phone in my jacket pocket. No service. Of course. When I looked up, the stall door had moved just a few inches, enough for the darkness inside to look deeper. And then, a hand appeared. Pale, thin fingers gripped the edge of the stall door, dragging slowly downward, leaving faint streaks like dust or something darker. I didn't think. I lunged for the main door, grabbing the handle, but it wouldn't budge. The bolt was jammed tight. My heart was pounding so loud I could hear it echo. I turned around. The stall door was now half open. A voice whispered, barely audible. "You shouldn't have come here." That was all I needed. I kicked the main door hard, once, twice, until the cheap metal frame gave way with a screech. I stumbled into the hallway, slamming into the opposite wall. The fluorescent light above me flickered violently, humming louder than before. I turned back and froze. The bathroom door was now wide open. The light inside flickered, and for a split second, I saw someone standing just inside the doorway, not moving, not breathing. Just a shape, long hair, gray clothes, eyes that caught the light in an unnatural way. Then the light went out completely. I bolted. I ran down the hall, through the store, but the cashier was gone. The counter was empty. The radio behind it buzzed with static. The front door resisted for a moment, as if the air itself was holding it shut, then burst open. Cold night air hit my face as I sprinted to my car. The van was still there, but the driver's door was open. Inside, something glinted on the seat. An old pocket knife and a keychain shaped like a gas pump, the kind you'd get for free decades ago. The air around the van smelled foul, metallic, almost like old blood. I didn't wait to look closer. I jumped into my car, started the engine, and peeled out of the lot, gravel spraying behind me. I drove for miles without looking back, terrified that if I checked the rearview mirror, I'd see something sitting in the back seat. When I finally reached the next town, I pulled into a 24-hour diner and sat there for half an hour, hands shaking. trying to calm down. The waitress must have seen the look on my face because she asked if I was okay. I told her what happened. The gas station, the guy, the locked door. She frowned, her face going pale. Greater than, you said Harper's fuel stop. Yeah, I said. Just off Route 46. She shook her head slowly. Greater than. That place burned down in 2005. Nobody's run it since. I stared at her, waiting for her to laugh, but she didn't. I opened my phone, finally catching a bit of signal, and looked it up. She was right. The photos showed nothing but a charred foundation and weeds. No working lights, no pumps, no store, and definitely no cashier. That was 3 weeks ago. Every night since, I wake up around the same time, 1 a.m., to the sound of 3 soft taps on the wall beside my bed. Tap, tap, tap. Just like before. And sometimes, if I listen closely enough, I swear I can still hear the voice. You shouldn't be here. I've driven through plenty of lonely roads in my life, but that night on Route 46, I learned what true isolation feels like. I was headed south through rural Kentucky, returning from a late delivery job. The highway was empty, the kind of empty where even the sound of your own tires starts to feel wrong. The dashboard clock read 12:47 a.m. when I first noticed my gas gauge, needle hovering on empty. I cursed under my breath. I'd passed the last station almost 30 miles back, assuming I'd hit another soon. Big mistake. The further I went, the darker it got. The moon was hidden behind clouds, and the only light came from my high beams slicing through mist and endless trees. No houses, no traffic, no signs of life. When the engine sputtered, my stomach dropped. I coasted to the shoulder and turned the key again. Nothing but silence. That's when I realized I didn't even have cell signal. I sat there for a minute, listening to the ticking of the cooling engine and the whisper of wind through the trees. The air felt unnaturally still. I thought about waiting until morning, but the night pressed on me in a way that made sitting still impossible. So I stepped out. The smell of cold asphalt and pine hit me as I looked down the black ribbon of road stretching endlessly in both directions. That's when I saw headlights in the distance. At first, I felt relief wash over me. Finally, someone. The vehicle slowed. A dark green pickup, older model but clean. The driver rolled down the window. He was maybe late 40s, lean, with a scruffy beard and a cap pulled low over his eyes. His voice was low and gravelly. "Out of gas?" he asked. "Yeah," I admitted. "Been stuck here for about an hour. You wouldn't happen to know where the nearest station is?" He scratched his chin, eyes darting past me toward the empty stretch of road. "There's one up the way a few miles. Old place, but still open. Hop in. I'll get you there." I hesitated. Something about the way he said it felt rehearsed, but standing alone in the dark was worse, so I nodded and climbed in. The door shut with a heavy metallic click. For a while, we just drove in silence. The rhythmic hum of tires was the only sound. He didn't have the radio on, didn't even hum, just stared straight ahead, eyes fixed on the road like it was something personal. "Not a lot of folks take this route at night," he said suddenly. I glanced at him. "Yeah, I noticed. Kind of eerie, huh?" He smirked without humor. "Depends who you're riding with." Something about the way he said that made my stomach knot. I laughed nervously and looked out the window. The trees along the roadside seemed endless, black silhouettes clawing at the fog. Then I noticed something. We had turned off the main highway. The asphalt had changed to cracked, uneven pavement. My gut tightened. I thought you said the station was off Route 46. He nodded. "It is. Shortcut, but it didn't feel like a shortcut. The road was narrowing, the trees pressing closer, swallowing what little moonlight there was. After what felt like 10 minutes, I finally saw it. A flickering fluorescent sign half buried in vines. The letters were faded, only a few still lit. STA. The place looked dead. A single rusted pump leaned to one side. The windows were boarded from the inside, and a torn, open sign dangled by one corner. "This doesn't look open," I said quietly. He didn't answer. Just pulled the truck up near the pump, shifted into park, and turned to me. "Go check." His tone was flat. Not a suggestion, an order. I hesitated. His eyes caught mine, and there was nothing behind them. No irritation, no kindness, just emptiness. I swallowed and stepped out. The gravel crunched under my boots. The cold hit me like a wall, carrying that strange smell, metallic, like rust or old blood. The closer I got to the pump, the clearer it became. It hadn't worked in years. The nozzle was snapped. The digital screen shattered. Cobwebs stretched across the handle. There was no gas here. I turned to tell him, but he was already out of the truck. He stood near the hood, watching me. Not moving, not blinking, just watching. The headlights cast his shadow long and thin across the ground, stretching toward me like it wanted to touch. "There's no fuel," I said, trying to sound casual. He tilted his head slightly. "Yeah, figured." That word again. Figured. Like he already knew. My throat went dry. "Maybe we should head back to the highway, find another place." His hand twitched toward his jacket pocket. That was enough for me. I bolted. Behind me, I heard his boots strike the gravel. He was fast, faster than I expected. I ran around the side of the building, lungs burning. That's when I saw the car, an old sedan, half buried in weeds behind the gas station. The windshield was smashed, the driver's door hanging open, and dark stains marked the seat. My mind went blank. Someone had been here before me, and they hadn't made it out. I dropped behind the rusted frame, pressing my back against cold metal. The night was so still, I could hear my pulse pounding in my ears. His footsteps slowed, steady, deliberate. "You should have stayed in the truck," he called out. His voice was almost amused. I clenched my jaw, scanning for an escape. Then I saw it. A gap behind the building where the tree line started. I waited until his boots crunched closer. Then I ran for it. Branches tore at my sleeves as I crashed into the woods. The darkness was thicker here, almost solid. The ground dipped sharply, and I stumbled, catching myself on a fallen branch. Behind me, I heard him again. Closer now. "Come on now. You can't get far." His voice carried through the trees like smoke, low, teasing. I kept running. My lungs burned. My legs screamed. I didn't care. But then, something changed. A new sound, rustling, from the other side of the woods. At first I thought it was an echo, or an animal maybe. But then there was a rhythm to it. Footsteps. More than one pair. My heart nearly stopped. There were others. I froze, trying to listen. The footsteps stopped too. The silence that followed was thick, unnatural, like the whole forest was holding its breath. Then, from the dark, "You ain't the first one out here." The voice wasn't his. It came from somewhere deeper in the trees. I backed up, my hands shaking. The truck driver's voice echoed next. "Told you, didn't I? This road don't take you where you want to go." That's when I saw the faintest movement in the dark, something shifting between the trees. Pale shapes. I turned and ran toward the faint orange glow ahead. Headlights. My truck. Branches whipped my face as I broke through the tree line, stumbled onto the cracked road, and sprinted for my vehicle. I fumbled the keys with shaking hands, slammed into the driver's seat, and twisted the ignition. The engine coughed, then roared. I slammed the pedal. Gravel sprayed as I shot down the road. My eyes flicked to the rearview mirror. There was nothing. No man. No figures. Just the gas station fading into the darkness behind me. I didn't stop driving until dawn. When I finally pulled into a diner near the state line, I stepped out and realized my hands were still trembling. I told a local trucker what happened. He stared at me like I'd grown a second head. "Station like that?" he said slowly. "Ain't been one out there for near 30 years. Burned down back in the 90s. Took a few travelers with it. They say I laughed nervously, thinking he was joking. But when I checked my map later, there was nothing marked where that road should have been. Just an unbroken stretch of forest. I don't drive that route anymore. And sometimes, late at night when I stop for gas, I swear I still smell that same metallic air. Like something old. Something waiting." I've always liked working late. The diner I managed sat on the edge of town. Nothing fancy. Just a 24-hour joint with squeaky stools, burnt coffee, and a neon sign that buzzed more than it glowed. By the time I'd clean the counters, cash out the register, and lock up, it was always close to midnight. The drive home took maybe 20 minutes through a stretch of quiet highway, the kind that made you feel like the world had gone to sleep. I liked it that way, but that night changed everything. That night, I realized how quickly safe can disappear. The air was cold when I left the diner. Frost coated the edges of my windshield, and the street lamps flickered in the empty parking lot. I got into my car, started the heater, and began the slow drive home. Halfway there, I noticed the fuel gauge. I'd been running on fumes for the last few miles. I sighed, turning off onto a familiar exit. There was a small gas station just off Route 51. I'd stopped there dozens of times before. The overhead lights were bright, humming against the silence, and the single attendant was usually too glued to his phone to bother anyone. It always felt normal. Until that night. It was 12:17 a.m. when I pulled in. The lot was empty except for one vehicle. A black SUV parked near the far end, just under the flickering sign. The windows were tinted dark, so dark I couldn't see a thing inside. I hesitated for a second, my headlights catching the faint outline of someone sitting behind the wheel. Then I brushed it off. People parked there all the time. Maybe someone was resting, maybe waiting for a friend. I wasn't about to let paranoia win over exhaustion. I stepped out, swiped my card, and started the pump. The cold bit through my jacket as the wind picked up. The only sound was the steady hum of the overhead lights and the soft click of the fuel gauge counting up. When the pump finally clicked off, I felt an odd kind of relief. I just wanted to go home. But as I reached to remove the nozzle, a voice behind me said, "Hey, miss." It was low, male, close. I turned. Two men stood a few feet away, both wearing dark hoodies. One taller, one shorter, their faces hidden by shadow and the glare of the station lights. Something about the way they stood, relaxed but intentional, made my stomach twist. "Can I help you?" I asked, trying to sound calm. The taller one smiled faintly. "Yeah. You can hand over your keys at first. I thought it was a joke, some kind of sick prank." But his tone wasn't playful. It was flat, mechanical. "Sorry," I said, forcing a nervous laugh. "Your keys," he repeated, this time sharper. "Now." My hand instinctively went to my pocket, fingers brushing the keys. My heart thudded so loud I could barely hear anything else. The shorter one took a step closer, his breath reeking of smoke and cheap whiskey. "You heard him," he said, his voice rough. "Don't make this harder than it needs to be." I looked toward the convenience store window. The attendant was inside, slouched behind the counter, eyes glued to his phone. The door had already been locked for the night. No help there. The world suddenly felt very small. Just me, the two of them, and the empty hum of fluorescent light. I tried to think. If I gave them my car, I'd be stranded miles from town with no phone, no way home. If I refused, who knew what they'd do? The taller one sighed. She's gonna be difficult. Then I saw it, the flash of silver in his hand, a knife, small but sharp enough to make my throat tighten. Listen, he said quietly, we don't want to hurt you. Just the car, my breath caught. The edges of my vision blurred. I felt trapped, the kind of trapped that makes every second feel like forever. I swallowed hard. All right, I said slowly, pretending to give in. Let me just get the keys. I slipped my hand deeper into my pocket, curling my fingers tight around the key fob. Good girl, the shorter one said with a smirk. That was the last straw. Before they could react, I spun around, sprinting toward my car. Gravel crunched under my boots. Hey, one of them shouted. I barely got a hand on the door handle before I felt a yank from behind. The shorter one had grabbed my arm, pulling me back so hard my shoulder burned. You think you're funny, he hissed. The taller man started toward us, the knife glinting under the lights. I panicked. My knee shot up instinctively, connecting hard with the shorter man's leg. He shouted, stumbling backward, and I tore free, fumbling with the car door. That's when it happened. Tires screeched against the pavement. Headlights flooded the lot. A silver sedan swung into the station, brakes squealing. The men froze, blinded for a second. I didn't wait. I ran toward the store, pounding on the glass door. Help! Please! The attendant finally looked up, startled, his phone clattering to the floor as he jumped to his feet. Behind me, I heard movement. Footsteps, then silence. When I turned, the two men were gone. The black SUV that had been sitting by the pumps peeled out, tires screaming as it shot down the road, disappearing into the dark. My body felt numb as I leaned against the door, shaking. The man who just pulled in, middle-aged, wearing a mechanic's uniform, stepped out of his car, eyes wide. You all right, ma'am? He asked, rushing over. They tried. My voice cracked. I held up my keys, realizing I'd never let them go. The attendant unlocked the door, waving me inside. Jesus Christ, he muttered. You want me to call the cops? I nodded, still shaking. He grabbed the phone, hands trembling almost as much as mine. By the time the police arrived 15 minutes later, there was nothing left to find. No footprints, no SUV, nothing. I gave my statement, describing everything, their clothes, their voices, the knife. The officer listened quietly, jotting down notes. When I finished, he looked at me and said, You're lucky. We've had a few like this lately. Same setup. Late-night stations, lone drivers. You did the right thing running. His words sent a chill through me that I still can't forget. Lucky. That's all I was. They never caught the men. The security cameras at that station hadn't worked in months. There were no witnesses, no plates, nothing. For weeks I kept replaying it in my head. That SUV sitting in the shadows, those voices, the sound of my heartbeat echoing in my ears. I quit working late shift soon after. I stopped driving that highway altogether. And even now, years later, I still tense up when I pull into a gas station after dark. Every time I see a vehicle with tinted windows, that same chill runs down my spine. People call it paranoia, but it's not. It's instinct. And instinct is the only reason I made it out alive that night.